And the journey was arrogance. Humble yourself, young man, because you're not really as good as you think. What does work really mean now? Is it
Yeah.
managers? Is it creators? Is it great teams build great ideas, and great ideas change the world?
Welcome to Raw AI Solutions, the podcast where we explore how business leaders navigate a fast-moving world of AI and digital transformation. I'm your host, Denise Powell, and today we are joined by Rob Rayo. Rob, welcome.
Thank you so much, Denise. I can't thank you enough for giving me the opportunity to talk and explore something I have a deep passion for, which is artificial intelligence and really building great technologies to make the world better. So I appreciate your time.
Oh, well, thank you so much for actually being on here. Absolutely thrilled to have you. Rob, for those of you who don't know, is the CEO of SCA Robotics. And I was wondering, Rob, would you like to kick it off by sharing a little bit about your background and give us an overview, or the listeners an overview of SCA Robotics?
I am a serial entrepreneur. I think life is dictated by luck, right? I have
Mhm.
some great fortune in my life, and I would consider myself the luckiest guy. One, being born to my mother and father. They were immigrants to America in the 70s. My father came to Harlem with $800 in his pocket and was subsequently robbed in that day. And I asked my father later, I said, Daddy, were you scared? He said, No, son. No, I wasn't. He said, more uncertain about my future. And he said, well, I said, Daddy, what did you do? He said, I did everything I could to get that money back because I had to bring your mother over. That was the story of my family, my origin story. My father was one of the greatest men I've ever known. He came with literally nothing but a brain and a work ethic like I've never seen. I often wonder if he'd not been born on that rice paddy, where would he be? But a Nobel Prize winner, definitely an astronaut who I have friends that are astronauts that we could talk about or not. But and I had the honor of actually going to and taking my father to one of these induction ceremonies for one of the greatest astronauts I've ever known, Dr. Bernard Harris, and it was one of the great highlights of my life. But that being
Wow.
said, I was born to him, and I was a child with neurodiversity issues. I was attention deficit, could not sit still, had a speaking problem. If you looked at my early report cards, most people would tell you that this kid was probably going to work on cars for most of his life. Most of my teachers never believed that I was going to. There was a few, and you have to have those light posts or angels on the path to grab you through. And I had that. I had a great math teacher who took a great belief in me, and I was able to see a 4 by 4 matrix in my head in the ninth grade. And he said, "There's great promise in you. Do not squander this." Right. And so those gifts, those what would be hindrances you're young, I would call ADH a super gift. It's like, once you can get those things loaded, you can
Yeah.
multi-process. And the dyslexia became a visual mind. And so any three-dimensional puzzle I can solve pretty much. I'm pretty good at those things. And that's where I left my head. And then the lack of not reading. I had a little brother who was probably a genius by most accounts. He was reading at like 3, and I was so envious that my brother could read and I could not at his level. And he used to tell me, he said, I'll help you get through that. But once I started to read, I never stopped. And so my memory was growing, but my oculocules were not there yet, but my hands were. So there's all these parts that are kind of gangly. But my fortune was to be born with my parents. My parents raised me in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And for artificial intelligence, anyone that understands it, we know Jeff Hinton from Scotland was the genius of AI. But the story gets better because I was born in Pittsburgh and Carnegie Mellon had won the early DARPA work, which became the stuff of Red Whitaker, who started the Carnegie Mellon Robotics Institute, which later became Boston Dynamics. Raj Reddy was a friend of our families, a distant friend, but a friend. And Raj was the head of the Software Institute. But I didn't know, I just knew these guys as uncles, and we were just kind of working through. I happened to go to college in Pittsburgh area and eventually got into a lab by a guy by the name of Bob Sturgis, a hero in most accounts. He was a doctor of science and he engaged the young mind. And I think in the world today, we don't have enough mentors, right, to take people further. But I, very lucky, happened to meet Bob Sturgis, but I had a chance encounter with a great friend. His name was Sean Cho, now a professor at the University of Pittsburgh. But David Tolliver was the guy that he introduced me to. And David, I would argue, was probably one of the greatest artificial intelligence minds. He built the fracture tool with UPMC that later became the basis of Watson. But back in 1995, now, if you realize, I mean, my journey was a circuitous journey. I went through different colleges, but happened to walk into labs and things started happening. We met and we talked about AI. There was no compute. If you looked at Red Whitaker's robots, there were clods. The only thing they won was a defense contract to take out the oil fields in Kuwait. That's it. They were not really, but he was a prescient thinker. He was that's what you need to be exposed to. We need to think the big things so we can
Mm.
create the great world, right? And you need big thinkers to do that. And he was one of them, no doubt. And David, another. My friend Sean, another. Many others along that path. If you feed those minds that kind of fuel, they will rise up. And I believe that was the case here. But also, my fortune happened. I started a company when I was very young. So this goes back into the Rob stories. That touched me, and I was around big minds. But I started my first company in my 20s and failed. And that's entrepreneurship is failure to success, failure to, or as they say in the West, fake it till you make it. But whatever you want to call that, that's what we do, right? And so I was really naive and very arrogant, but I took a shot at something and lost. And I have 13 patents to my name, but this was the first of those. And I thought I was an arrogant young man. I walked into a company, got a license agreement, thought I had it all until they pulled the agreement and they worked around the patent. And that became my journey. And that was the greatest luck. I would never look at that as a bad moment because in that, my patent attorney was so heartbroken by what had happened. He said, I will never leave your side. And he still hasn't left my side. He's still my counsel today. And the journey was arrogance. Humble yourself, young man, because you're not really as good as you think. And that's what the world will teach you if you let it open it up. It's like that famous line from If. Can you walk with kings and not lose the common touch? Can you use those worn out tools and pull yourself up one more time and not mention the loss that happened before, right? That's the story. And you need to be taught that. I don't think people learn that naturally. So the world was teaching me that. And then along that journey, I happened to get into another startup that was doing shape memory alloys, which was another incredible ride. I got to get plugged into the university system. We took out a medical metal that we were the first to braze nitinol at a thousandth of a millimeter, never been done, use magnetrons, and it was an incredible ride. But again, what I learned there, I mean, these are the lessons you have to pick up if you're an entrepreneur. I thought I could build a company and be a socialist. You can't be a company and be a socialist. There's one leader and there's one vision, and you have to trust yourself. I did not trust myself. I trusted my partners. I thought I could have the greatest minds and build something like that, and we could all be friends. Not true. Doesn't work like that. It's not how it worked. My partners eventually, for whatever it was, we ended up getting an investment and an angel came in and took the company from me. But I learned. And then along that time came. And now the visions of David and Rob came together. And David and I had a chance meeting again at a wedding. And we spoke for hours. And that became the beginning of SCA Robotics. He told me, I said, David, do you think we're ready for AI today? He said, absolutely. The compute is here. Everything is ripe for the things you're talking about. But he said something very poignant to me. He said, Rob, in life, I grew up poor, never be poor. So if you have a way to make money, I'm curious, but not going to be poor. So be careful about what you ask for from me, right? And so I started SCA with David's help. He was there in the beginning. But the reason David's purpose and a great luck again, fortuitous bounce that I met David, that because it allowed me to bring the other scientists that came to be. And in that, we were able to pick up three very gifted scientists along the way, Dr. Goldschmidt being a big one. He was one of the early authors of a lot of dark matter papers, and his chief lieutenant, Dr. Josh Renner, who is a brother and a fellow man in battle with me through this journey. But he came aboard. And then that I slowly building this team of SCA. At the time, nobody had done some of the work that we did, and we were the first to actually categorize and delineate brain tumors, right? And a lot of good fortune here, but we were able to take down City of Hope. We took down a data set, we annotated it, we took 8 doctors, and we did it in 6 months. That became the first of its kind. That project, along with a diabetes predictive tool, which we built 8 years ago, which wasn't there, diabetes tool won best of show. That got us into an incubator here in Silicon Valley called Plug and Play. Plug and Play, YC Combinator. Those are the hierarchy. Plug and Play, started by a guy named Saeed Amin, rug salesman. It's a short story. Rug salesman ends up having a rug salesman house in Palo Alto. Some guy named Peter Thiel comes knocking on the door. We need some office space. He says, sure. They don't pay rent. He said, guess what, guys? I don't want rent. I want terms. Turns out to be the greatest term sheet in Silicon Valley. Somewhere north for $100,000, walked away between 150 and 175 million at the IPO PayPal. That's Saeed Amin, and that's only one. He did Google and Logitech behind that. The guys, but if you meet him, you'll realize he's one of the greatest men I've ever met. I mean, you meet a lot of people that are full of themselves in this business. He's not. He is as gentle as a man you'd ever meet. Humble, walk with kings and not lose that common touch, right? That's him. He gave us a shot. We got into plug and play. We were the second AI company in plug and play of my cohort. Somewhere north of 13 billion of companies have been acquired out or raised. And we were the first of that. We rose that wave and we came down, and I had done a number of projects along the way. I did one with a company in your great country, Cosworth Motors. We helped build a AI tool for computer vision as it related to cars and fuel price. Along that journey, we ended up with 5 or 6 patents in the medical space, which now is of great interest because at the time, large language models didn't exist. And now they're actually looking at disease protocol, which means diabetes. We most recently got interventional cardiology, but it's my whole mission in my company is to be comfortable with the uncomfortable, be able dare to see something different, right? And push. I mean, we can have disagreements. That's okay. Brothers disagree, but we will always come back to a situation that we are together because, the enemy doesn't live out there. The enemy comes from within, right? And so the teams you build are that. You have to have that one heartbeat. Why do the SEALs, who are some of the lowest paid operatives in the world, why do they give their lives for each other? It's not been the money. It's because they believe in each other. That's the key. Great teams build great ideas, and great ideas change the world. That's my view. I know we have technologists out in the world, and I won't mention names, that talk about a world where you don't need empathy. I don't believe that. Empathy is a superpower. If we can sense that within our units and our teams and our teammates, we can build great things. Because from empathy actually comes the genesis of ideas. If you can feel someone's pain, in my
Mhm.
case, my mother was a breast cancer doctor, which I didn't mention that yet, but my mother hates when I do this too. She hates this, but she is an inspiration in that way because she took me to the hospitals and I watched these patients. And my mother was an early clinician under Dr. Bernard Fisher, inspired me. I saw people dying in the 70s, which was an 80% kill rate. My mother, for just a little fingernail, typed those tissues that became the protein coat, that became Herb C, that became the greatest blockbuster drug that allowed us to tap into cancer cells and take them out using viral payloads. Huge game. Death rate
Wow.
was 80% in the 70s, 90% survival today. And that was Fisher. Arrogant as he was, tremendous mind in that he changed the way that surgery looked at things. So again, great luck. Great luck. I have a board member on my board. His name's Bradley Horowitz. Remarkable human being. Seed investor, Slack. His litany of things that he has done. You just need to do a little Google and you'll see what I'm talking about. But I actually spoke recently on behalf of him at a meeting, and it was an honor to actually give him an introduction so justly deserved. But it's this idea of really putting yourself in the right place, right time, right ideas to push forward and never giving up. I mean, entrepreneurship is a brutal game, but if you believe in what you believe in, you have to stick to that. It's like a great soccer team, right? If you're a 43 soccer team, you're not going to be a 52 soccer team. You're not going to play defense. If you're Brazil, you play samba. That's what you do. And the world has to catch you. That's what they do. And if they don't catch you, well, then you missed. Great. We win. If you lose, well, you lose on what you were, what you can be, right? I think that's the beauty of these kind of things, right? In entrepreneurship and the work we do, whether it be fusion power, quantum compute, artificial intelligence, robotics, those things are things that people can't really get. And in 10 years ago or 20 years ago, that's when a lot of these ideas came to be. If you read stuff on Elon, he will tell you Star Trek was one of his ways he was thinking of the world because the world wasn't ready for that thinking. Same thing with Steve Jobs. You read their books, they were thinking way out. The world wasn't ready, but they were building a world so it would work. And if you could see a perfect world, what would you do to get there? You would stop at nothing, right? That's most of us that do this work. I live with my heart. I look for ways to actually, with good intentions, to bring good things from. But I can argue, and you can tell me more, Denise, when you come through here, that AI could be one of those things. It's the greatest revolution I've ever seen in my life. And I've been through Web.1. I've seen wireless, I've seen cloud, and I grew up with the backdrop of cars, and I loved cars. and automotives, I think, were probably one of the greatest things to move society. But I don't think we're ever going to see anything quite like this. This is one of one. And how it rolls out, what it can do, the destabilization, the power structure, all fascinating for countries and societies at large.
That was very interesting. I absolutely love what you said about your father. Oh, just absolutely incredible. I was going to say, with all those massive role models in your life, how has that shaped the way that you lead today?
Because I had such a hard time belonging. My home was a good home. It was obviously with me, I was like hell on wheels, but they taught me, they both are very kind people and they show up in different ways, right? And I think as a leader, you have to be able to sense what's going on within your team. And it may not be work. It could be a divorce. It could be something's going on with your child. And you have to be able to feel all that because are you betting on that day? Are you betting on the long game, right? And for me, it's the long game. More importantly, what am I as a human being? I mean, if I don't feel who you are and I don't take the time to have a cup of coffee with you, what am I doing, right? I mean, it's not dollars and cents at that point. There's a great story by this guy. I don't know if you know H.J. Heinz. He was an incredible entrepreneur in Pittsburgh. He invented ketchup. He came here
Mm.
as a German immigrant. And there was a guy that came to work. And the guy missed a day of work. And Mr. Hines said, "Why did you miss work?" He said, "My son." "What's wrong with your son?" He said, "He can't walk, Mr. Hines." So Mr. Hines went to his house with three carpenters because he could build things. And he built a ramp. And he said, "You will never take a day off for that. Your son will always have what he needs. Never have to make any excuses for him." That's what leadership is being able to feel if a great leader is going to step in this and ask you to do the exceptional, then he has to do the exceptional or she. They have to lead like that. And that's the key part of it is empathy. Lead with your heart and let the mind follow. Most leaders today lead with the intellect and they try to delineate out and they start to say these rules. And this is the problem with AI in some ways. It's like you think you can get the logic down, but what about the empathy part of this? That's really general purpose intelligence or sentient intelligence, as they call it, is that ability to make the leap, the intuitive leap. But human beings, by nature, have that. I live in that. I honestly believe that, and that's the part with teammates or people following you. You have to be your truth, right? I mean, there's a classic line by Gandhi. Some mother sent their son to Gandhi, and this kid she told him, "Mr. Gandhi, I'd like you to tell the boy to stop eating candy." So he comes and he sends the boy home, and then he asked for him to come back in 3 days. And he told the boy, "Stop eating candy." And the mother said, "Why did you send him back?" He said, "Because on that day I had candy. How could I tell him not to eat candy if I ate it myself?" That's truth, right? And people follow that truth. And I
Yeah.
think you have to see their truth too, not just yours. Can't be so full of yourself, right? And that's part of my journey is that humbling, right? You fall and you fall. When you fall, you see not just yourself, you see your connectedness to all of it. I mean, I do believe great entrepreneurs have a frequency, no doubt. And I've met a lot of them and they're just built, wired different. I'm not saying they all operate on this level, but there is that. There is that. And I never had the opportunity to meet a guy like Steve Jobs, but my feeling is he was thinking like those kind of things. He was trying to build perfect product, whatever it took. And was it selfish in some ways? Maybe, but his point was if I built a great product, I'll affect everybody. That's my gift to the world, is to build a great product. He had no idea that an iPad would open up a world for children with autism. He gave them a visual world that they never had before. What a huge game that was. Unintended consequence. I may create an AI for brain tumors. It could be used in all sorts of ways, right? But we showed them how to do it. So now what's next, right? What's next?
There's so much I want to say about this, but I will say absolutely, you got to fail your way to success. Entrepreneurs definitely have a different mindset completely, and they are incredible to be around. Absolutely. In today's topic, we're going to be exploring really about the hidden costs of pushing new tools, whether that's AI or technology out, without actually getting the buy-in from the organizations and the impact that it actually really has on businesses. So,
Yeah.
in
Go
your
ahead.
experience, what is the biggest disconnect between AI tools, what they promise, versus what the business is actually ready for?
I think right now there's some resistance. We've seen it too in the
Mm.
business world versus what you're making money doing. We've had a number of these kind of experiences, but I think the big problem with AI is cost per token, right? Implementation cost, right? And then what is it actually solving? So these large language models, as they stand today, are very compute heavy, very cost heavy. And so if you go down to even the bit level, you look at like the Blackwell chip that NVIDIA's got going on right now. That
Mhm.
chip runs about 800 watts per chip. Multiply that by 64, not including peripherals and bus. And now you're talking kilowatts per cage. And then you add these kilowatts up. Now you got megawatts per centers. That's a massive power compute. And as the thermal component goes up, you have to be able to cool these things. And we know there's a thermal efficient that's not working there, right? All those costs are being added in that. You add that up, right now, Chad is losing about $700,000 a day. That's a known fact. That's because the compute level is at that. So what I think we're moving towards is, can you come to a CEO, say some medical company, we'll just throw Medtronic out there and say, listen, I can build you something specifically to knock out a cost. We know they are helping people write things, marketing, term papers. Kids are using the cheat. That my daughters do that too. Or I shouldn't say they do that, but they're definitely using it.
Yes.
But I mean, that's
Yeah.
going on. So we know there's efficiencies in here, but what is specifically, right? For a business, you need to say, like ERP networked a company together and showed you operational efficiencies from accounting to HR to et cetera. What is an
Mhm.
AI going to give you? What's that? That's what the ROI, I think, is the real threat today. If you go to a mainline business like Medtronic or General, what are you going to tell them? What exactly can you do? Can you build a better uh, engine for a jet? Can you find me more errors? That's worth something to me, right?
Yeah.
But I will say Microsoft just laid off 9,000 people last week. They're using it to write code, right? And I would tell you, I just spoke to a company building an AI to look at the QA of code, right? So another problem we have in AI is it can write it, but it's not the most efficient way to write it. And we have this area of hallucinations, meaning the data sets, I think, I don't know, this is Rob supposing out here, may have some stuff that are not working right, right? So there's a whole quality of piece, garbage in, garbage out. So that's kind of what we play with in AI. But the main issue today is fear of the unknown,
Mhm.
and I think costing. What does it cost me to do it? And the platforms aren't cheap. If you looked at Azure to pay to an implementation, it's not cheap for a company. So am I willing to risk a upcycle to go to cloud compute? Because they charge per instance on their GPUs. And the GPUs are hoarded under NVIDIA right now. And NVIDIA, I personally think, I think Tom and Simon Duggan and another of these companies, we have to get more efficient. It's like when we went to the moon, we used the Saturn V, and the Saturn V was incredible, esoteric materials, titanium. But if you look modern right now, Elon's using cold rolled stainless to launch those rockets. So it's a modern process on these materials to get us to where we need to go. Same thing here. We took the most incredible way to solve the problem, but I don't know necessarily that it's actually production level. And
Mhm.
does it save them what they need? I mean, is it really addressing? I think it will. AI itself is going to be in every place because I have a company based in this, but more so, you can see it coming, but where is the first tip? When are you going to see General Electric running it? Or, I know my man over there, Branson, who I have a deep respect for, I'm sure he's looking at ways to bring this into, because he is an efficiency guy, but we have to have a step in and you have to say, okay, it can do this. It can make payroll faster. And it will, but I don't know that people are ready to make that move. I had a big conversation with a massive company that I won't mention here, but we were talking about a disease portfolio and we showed them a disease portfolio. We delivered it to them. But still, the guy told me they did 100 AI pilots and nothing deployed to production to date, roughly between 250 and 500,000 per. Crazy, huh?
Why do you think that was?
I think there's fear. I think there's fear.
Mhm.
They don't understand that you have to bring in a different system. You're upgrading on a cloud. You're paying additional cost.
Mhm.
When you look at companies that make 2 billion a quarter, which is the size of this company, now you can see that now it becomes an interesting thing. And who's going to put their neck on the line as a digital transformation officer for that extra cost? When that shows, it will show up, right? So how do you look at that macro and report that up and say we're getting a value? What is the value?
Yeah.
Can you tell me better about your disease model? Okay. But what does that give me an ROI? They want to know what the number is, right?
Absolutely. Bottom line, what is the ROI? And it's so hard to prove with AI as well, because everyone's case studies. And you're right, the fear of the unknown, it just creates even more fear. And
Hmm.
unfortunately, the only thing to get rid of that is action. And so it's the more companies start to take this on, I think the more case studies are going to be, and the more the fear will begin to subside potentially.
I agree. And I don't believe, and this is a real discussion AI, platforms versus agents work, right? I mean, is it going to be Anthropic or Chad or I don't know. I don't know. But I personally believe it's going to be small, determined agent software packets,
Yeah.
knocking out specific task, specific moment to do specific job, slowly building up off these agents and a group of agents to create what we are. Real AI that Red talked about was actually when he looked at robots, he was talking about robots working together to solve problems. That's kind of what I'm saying right now. Is a group of small problems built to a big problem and take it out. Not one huge glue like the great Google did. And Google was an amazing is an amazing company for what they were able to do, but that was built on an advertising model. That was built on, we're taking out Main Street basically and worked. It worked effectively. It was very, very effective at what it did. But is that really the case for AI? I'm not sure. Costs are much higher. No one's
Mhm.
really paying for this right now. Advertisers aren't paying for it, right? They are building community. There's no question. Customer acquisition is there. Like they're having that retention, but I don't know. I mean, it's the AI dilemma at the moment. Are we right in the mix of a tsunami, or are we a little bit dated? I don't know. IBM recently, the CEO wrote a report. He said 30% of tasks are being done by AI, but it's not as fast as he thought.
And
I
you
don't
also
know.
got to be worried, you've also got to be concerned about the bias in AI. And now there's bias programs to strip out the bias that's been created by AI as well. So I,
Right, right. I
one of the
mean,
major issues I think most companies have is they don't know the power of AI. They don't know what's out there. They don't know how it can actually help them out and what ROI they're actually going to get from that. So I think that they know this big term like AI. It's the same as digital. What is digital transformation? Digital can mean anything. AI is vast as well. And there's a lot of lack of knowledge. And I think that's also where agents come in to be able to show those smaller companies what hours out there, how is it able to help them, how's it going to benefit the ROI at the end of the day.
yeah, I agree. But I do think this is the age of the creator. AI is going to allow creation to be widespread. So if you allow creation in your company, idea creation, idea
Mm.
productization, you'll move much faster because it's not just AI. AI is essentially the brain. If you look at the work in robotics, I mean, you see the things that Elon's pulling out with those robots. It's all together. It's an ecosystem. I mean, it's like you could see down the road if you had working robots using artificial intelligence, what that would look like. You don't really, manufacturing houses could be 40% efficient. No one's going to take a sick day. It's a robot, right? It's just going to run. So that's the kind of thing that is right on a cusp. I mean, we're shifting, but the question is, can we make that work under existing economic? The companies that aren't shifting, I will tell you though, they're going to have a problem because there will be a competitor that can take out some of these mainline companies very quickly as the efficiency gains move. As these innovators, there's going to be a couple guys on the bleeding edge, just like in dot one. Webvan, Lewis Porter, really ahead of his time. He was Amazon, but Amazon did come, and look at what they became, a behemoth of mercantile work. Same. I think that day's here.
Yeah. I think the other thing about companies implementing AI and the adoption of it, sometimes maybe they're not ready for it. There's fear as well. I think there's a lot of fear that they're going to lose their jobs. Let's embrace it because it comes out as that there's a positive over here. I can do double the amount of workload in half the amount of time. But if I embrace this, I'm going to be out of a job in a year's time. What would you say to those companies and that kind of mindset to overcome that?
I mean, that's a hard one because we don't, none of us know how this is going to roll. None of us lived when they went from a water wheel to a gear. None, we weren't alive. In your great country, they started the Industrial Revolution, but the thought in AI, I can give you what the people I know talk about as well. There'll be another place to put certain people. I'm not sure. I wouldn't argue with that individual. I mean, we can always make this case in computer work, and especially in software, we talk about efficiency gain. This could be the greatest efficiency gain ever, but it does mean some loss. Now, I've
Mm.
read studies that jobs that were lost because of AI, there will be an equal, like a negative, zero sum game, right? I mean, I could see if I'm in a company, I would be scared. I mean, I would tell you the knowledge-based workers have our issue. If I'm a lawyer, if I'm a
Yeah.
doctor,
Mhm.
those jobs can be done. I mean, I've already shown that we can take out a doctor. I mean, it's just a question of when you want to hit that. I mean, we neuroradiologists, as far as I'm concerned, that's been done. We can do it. And Chat's doing it right now. If you look at the medical school, NYU, they're running that as their tool right now. It's a medical assist as we speak. How much smarter is it going to get? So you think about the high-end knowledge-based people, I don't know. I mean, but it that's what I would be worried more so. I don't think people working in like say like HVAC, right? Or the things that need that will come later. I think robots could be taught and trained to do that kind of work in time. It speaks to a, an Orwellian society though, right? What is data? What is people? What are the need for people? Is there, you start going down that conversation loophole. I'm a positive guy. I think this stuff's going to be incredible. I think we're going to knock out some of the great diseases. I think if you look at the work at DeepMind done by Hasib in the UK, he's a genius. AlphaFold really opened the gateway to the work that's being done in CRISPR. If you could take one protein, it took one PhD 7 years to get, and they mapped 400,000 in a year. What did he do to the world? He changed the whole landscape of how we look at the world. So there's that convergence. There's a biological CRISPR convergence. There's a
Mhm.
quantum computer. We're further down, and then there's an AI convergence and a robotics all at once. They're all layered. It's like a great biryani, right? We got the rice in there. Now the chicken's coming, and now another layer of rice, and it's all rolling down. And it started with artificial intelligence. I mean, it was
Mhm.
the simplest thing to take down. But in companies, yeah, I mean, there will be some pain. I don't, in America, you can see the shift. I mean, if I'm a computer science kid, I would ask myself, I wouldn't have anyone listening to this that's a computer science guy, but I mean, what is really your future? I'm not sure that in 5 years, AI can do it can write the code. It's done that. It can
Mhm.
check the code. It's not as efficient. There was a study at Arizona State where a teacher put in a computer at his class. He didn't tell the kids. And the kids were like, they were asking the same question. The computer got a C on the final, on a blank, on a blind final. So that was like 3 years ago. So it's working its way up. But
Yeah.
I still think there's this part of sentient intelligence. So recursive task, logic task,
Mhm.
we've got that. But being able to I always tell people AI is like a 3-year-old with no intuition. What makes a 3-year-old really brilliant is it can take some things and then guess. Makes a logical, not a logical, but an intuitive, a feel from what it gets because its sensory inputs are great, right? That's the step that needs to happen. When that happens,
Yeah.
now, I mean, I wrote a paper at the US Patent Office, right? Well, I told them, I said, at what point will the AI write the patent? Because in America, it's who's ordinary in the trade. Well, what does that mean? So who gets object creation at that point, right? If I wrote a great Freddie Mercury song and I write something off of that, shouldn't Freddie get paid for that? Or is it a new song? I don't know. I don't know, right? I mean, it just opens up a lot of different things there. But I mean, if I'm working to your original point, I'm concerned. I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We were like probably Birmingham in UK. We were steel town, heavy steel town.
Yeah.
And when I was a boy, there were 3 million jobs, 3 million people in my town. By the time I left, this is now like 10 years later, right? About 1 million people lived in that town. I always ask myself, where did the 2 million people go?
Yeah.
I don't know. But the steel business died in my life. I watched it, and my father was part of that too. He was a mining engineer, and it was awful. It was really awful because the transition was rough. Going from working, 50 hours. And this is the thing is what does work really mean now? Is it
Yeah.
managers? Is it creators? Is it
It's a whole new generation that's going to be raising, and there won't be jobs out there in 10 years' time is what there are today. We're going to see a very different world in like, I reckon 3 to 5 years from now.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I'm 100% with you, Denise. I don't I mean, I'd like to see a world where AI is not so male driven. This thing is right now, I have daughters, and I and
Mhm.
I think the more we include other minds in this, what I would call it like Star Trek version, a Borg per se, the better the Borg will be, the more just the Borg will be.
Mhm.
I mean, and that's where we are right now. It's creating the data sets that actually make sense to go forward. And truly, you need both sides, right and left brains, to make the leap. We're not there yet. That model will come soon. I'm not thinking we're far away, but we're going to get very close. And all of us are racing towards that, right? I mean, but the landscape, what's the playing field? That's curious. Very curious. I mean,
Interesting to see where we are when that
yeah,
happens.
yeah, for sure.
So is there any area in your business where you don't have AI that you would love to see AI be created for?
Um, I think like workflow, right? I mean, I think when you look at like accounting, taxes, the things that hold small businesses back, right? A quicker ERP implementation, not Salesforce per se, but something smaller for a mid-range company. You want speed, right? If you're small, you need to be nimble. You need to be like a SEAL team. You need to move quickly, take your target, and keep moving, right? Any of that other stuff kind of just slows you down, right? So having like an assistant that can handle a lot of that load that most CEOs take on because you got to wear five hats or COOs or somebody in your company, right? I think another big piece now, and we're seeing it in sales, right? Having targeted marketing. I'm working with kids today out of YC Combinator that are building tools like that, where they can actually define your market and target your market. So you want to be able to, fastest way you can get to ROI, one is taking off operational load. That would be great and will happen, I think. Second is being able to create the market quickly and find it without too much pain. So that's the other part of it, right? And I think that stuff still is coming forward. There's a lot of great tools. I mean, there's things that write your email now. There's things that do, blast out stuff for you. There are things that can identify verticals, but not as strong as I think. And I think for the small business, forget that if you're like Mercedes, but how do you unload that whole workflow from within your company? How do you adapt? How do you move? How do you scale, right? And there's a lot of great things in there, but it's still hard for small guys doing it. It's
Absolutely. And it is that thing about efficiency, what is the ROI and what is the cost of all of that? And what you're absolutely right. There's so many tools out there to look at your CRM and ERP and have those automated process flows. And it's getting better and better. It's overcoming that fear, taking that leap, especially if shareholders, they want to see what the ROI is. And sometimes you just have to take the leap and prove it once you've done it.
And if you're a small company, you're talking about your funding stack, right?
Yeah.
So how much of that cost is going to go into that funding? How much are you going to throw? 20% at it? 10%? What does that cost?
Yeah.
Versus you doing it, because you're trying to really you want to save it till you break the market, right?
Yeah.
That's what you're always doing. You're betting on the next game. That's what, as my friend Bradley will tell you, we bet on moonshots. We're trying to get to the moon. We're just going to keep throwing at it till we can launch. That's kind of what entrepreneurs do, especially in the tech game.
Yeah. So tell me something. Where do you see your company going in the next 6 to 12 months?
We have a huge opportunity right now. We're looking at a big. I never really thought I would do this. I know my teammates aren't going to like this part of it, but I don't. We're working on agent-based tools, and we're looking in finance right now for those opportunities because I think finance. What I learned is medicine in America is very difficult. It's a huge bottleneck. There's insurers, there's payers, there's the FDA. Although the intention, as John Milton said, the path to hell is paved with good intentions. Your intention was to do something really good, right?
Mm,
And so that didn't really play as we needed when I first started. And I dreamed of that platform, but I look at it now. Had we gotten a platform, we'd be broke. The sustainability of the cost per token and the work I was thinking
mm,
still a little big. But what I think is we're going to land these agent projects as we go forward, and we're looking in determinate software pieces within organizations. We have a couple big opportunities, and I think that's going to be the key to the company is stringing together like my old mentor had taught me, right, is to build the small robots working within a big cluster of robots to attack a bigger problem. I think that's really what we're going to do as a company and scale through. I mean, and for us too, as a small company, we're trying to really navigate the giant, right? When that sleeping giant's moving, you need to get out of the way. And you don't really want to be where Anthropic or Chat is. We're not going to compete with that. They have massive resource right now whether they make it or not, I don't know. I don't know. And Brad gave a talk about this. This is like now a week ago, and he was talking about the liquidity events. There's not many liquidity events right now to get out. There used to be an IPO ramp, a scale out. A lot of it's happening, M&A, as you know, and like the scale. Look at the scale. Last acquisition, Meta came in, they put in the 14, and they paid out some of those early investors. That's kind of a different way to come out of the market, right? And so
Yeah.
there's fear in the market right now. But for us, I think we're going to be the company that builds those key agents and determines out and tries to actually destabilize the ecosystem. I mean, we did some pioneering work, but you learn. Market taught us. We're not going to be Google. That was like a dream. That's not going to happen. We're not going to be like the way that Solera did and look at the genetic disease and attack it, or find your BRCA1 disease where that it represents breast cancer or prostate cancer and knock it out. That was a dream. I mean, that was what I was really when I first started this whole endeavor, and this is an entrepreneur's, this is the passion of an entrepreneur, is that you look at the most difficult problem and you want an answer, right? And maybe you're wrong. You have to accept that you could be wrong, and maybe I was wrong, but doesn't mean I'm not wrong forever. As Brad tells a story of Slack, he said he invested in this kid. He was a gamer. He's a friend of his. He let him couch surf on his couch. He knew nothing about games. 5 years later, they built one of the greatest communication channels ever. Went public and sold for 29 billion. I mean, it's the pivoting, knowing where you are and keep switching and switching and switching, and
Yeah.
you know having
As you
that.
said, failure way to success.
Yeah, right, 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 right. As long as you have the wherewithal and the courage to stay
Yeah.
on it, right? That's the toughest part. Is really because the market is right now fast moving. And like you said, how we started this is the ROI within these companies. They're
Mhm.
not throwing at this right now, Denise. They're just it's not like,
Absolutely.
I mean, when ERP came to life, it went through a life cycle, but it stuck because it actually brought real value. SAP, Oracle, people
Mm.
saw it back, well, way back when, right? They were all very valuable to linking a company together, storing data and pulling data out. And you can get numbers from that. Oh, yeah, we're making this much money now. We know that we need this many parts for the Mercedes drivetrain. And what can you tell me about AI in that way? Can it tell me that a plane's going to fail me? My view of this, though, is that I would think if AI is actually working effectively, is that I could tell you when you're going to die. What would you pay me for that? If I knew you
Not
were going to
bad.
get sick, what would you give me? You would give me everything, right? If it could save a loved one, what would you do, right? Or I have a friend in Israel right now looking at cognitive. He has a helmet that was used in special forces where he can quantify your emotional state. So if I knew something was wrong with you, what would you do? How would you change that? What could you do? Could I stop a driver from driving his car in a bad way because he's tired or something's going on? His emotional state is disrupted, right?
Yeah.
That I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if it answers the question, but
No, they're always good to ask these questions. Someone else. So, Celia, if you could solve one issue today in your business with a click of a finger, what would it be?
customer acquisition. If you
Mhm.
could tell me the top 10 targets that are actually going to spend in AI, I'd give you my right arm and get me directly to the guy that can make that happen. You know, and I know we waste a lot of time in meetings. A lot of time, a lot
That's,
of times going through some senior BD guy who's trying to work his name or whatever. If you could get me those decision makers, that's the
yeah.
one thing I love about what COVID did a lot of things that were screwed up, but one thing it did that was really good is it forced these meetings and allowed for efficiency to go into the chain, especially when it comes to creation of deals and projects. That's what we needed. But in AI, if you could give me the top 10 guys right now that are going
Mhm.
to get ready to stroke a check in Q3 or 4 that we could actually move forward today, that would be a great value to me. And could we build within their implementation cycle? Could we be the team to bring in agents to do XXX and scale? No AI company today is really profitable. If you go through the list of them, and I know
Mhm.
you probably have, they're not making money. So if you get an agent, you want to be able to determine how the costs come out of that, right? But that's if you ask me, that'd be my number one dream. And maybe dinner with, Elon Musk and see
I
where
was
his
going
money
to say Elon Musk, yes.
I don't think he'd take a dinner with me, but that's okay.
You never know. Well, Rob, listen, this has been such an insightful conversation. Thank you so much for being so open. Absolutely have loved listening to you. But before we wrap up, is there one piece of advice that you can give to leaders that are trying to implement new tools or new AI without creating chaos inside the organization?
Clarity. what are you trying to do clearly, and what does the tool specifically do? It's not a one-stop shop, but specifically, I think the clearer I make my messages, and I try to do this all the time. Every time I go into a meeting, I want three goals. What am I going to try to accomplish here? What are the three things I need to get? I need to get either a timeline, an objective, or a clear marker out. It's like it can't go on indefinitely, but clarity of what you are delivering to the ecosystem at that moment. If you can deliver that, I think that's pretty much what we were dealing. Because the only way you alleviate fear is to show truth, and truth comes in clarity, right? So that's what I would say. And I think a lot of business leaders there are very scared, like you said, because there's chaos and confusion. They don't know. So if you don't know, you're kind of got paralysis there, right? Paralysis, analysis by paralysis, right? You just analyze and stuck. But if I can be very clear, and the thing about that too, you know this and I know this, Denise, I have that meeting with you, like I said, I had it today, you got to go back to the war room. You got to spend that with three other guys who weren't in that meeting and you say, okay, why should we do this? Right? That's that's the next question. Can you give something that they can take the message back and then get gravity around it with an order? That's very difficult to do, as you probably know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for that. Finally, if listeners want to learn more about SCA Robotics or reach out to you, what's the best place that they can connect with you?
I give you my phone number, but you could use LinkedIn. It's awesome. I read my LinkedIn all the time. My email is rob.rao@sca-robotics.com. And I'm very open. Anyone, as you know, Denise, I reached out as you read. I don't have a problem talking to anybody. I have an open door policy. You just never know. My grandmother once said, she said, sometimes you never know who's coming to your house. And it might be God's son. So you should treat them as such, right? So I live by that. And so that's the
Very
same.
well
So
done.
if you find me on LinkedIn, Rob Rao on LinkedIn, CEO of SCA Robotics. There's a lot of Rows out there, but that's probably a good spot to start. And then as conversations go and things go, love to talk to anyone about this stuff. I love talking to other leaders about it. And I always get inspired by especially our young students. I'm a big mentor. I mentor a lot of kids and young business professionals along the way.
That's absolutely brilliant. Well, thank you so much. I really and truly appreciate your time, Rob. Thanks for having me on board.
Thank you, Denise. It was a pleasure.
Thanks.